There's a popular children's book series entitled Who Would Win? A 26-book series, no less, with titles such as Killer Whales versus Great White Sharks, or Coyote versus Dingo, or The Ultimate Small Shark Rumble. Now, if you look those up on Amazon, this is what Amazon says about that book series. It's an action-packed animal series with the question, what if one dangerous animal had a fight with another? Who do you think would win? In the popular Who Would Win series, kids will learn about each animal's anatomy, behavior, and more. Then compare and contrast the battling pairs before finally discovering the winner. This nonfiction collection is full of facts, photos, and realistic illustrations, including a range of mammals, sea creatures, insects, and dinosaurs to satisfy all kinds of animal fans, end quote. A library professional that I know says these books fly off the shelves almost as quickly as they can be reshelved upon their return. So the very first recorded history of competition is the ancient Olympic Games. The first ones held in 776 BCE in Olympia, Greece. These games involved, probably as we know, athletic contests and were celebrated every 4 years. History is full of rivalries, competitions, wars, and crusades. Frequently, including today, the struggle for territory and commodities are couched as necessary for personal or economic survival, but survival is often defined in terms of superior strength or dominance and control. There is specific language that surrounds competition. And as we know, language defines and shapes who we are. So consider these words which in part make up a competition family of words. Things like battle, combat, conflict, contend, contest, dispute, oppose, strive, defeat, win. We certainly come by our competitive nature naturally and honestly. When used thoughtfully, competition brings us innovation and progress. When used recklessly, it leads to exploitation, inequity, and ultimately conflict, war, and untold suffering. Competition, taken one step further, leads to a drive to conquer and to dominate, originating from a place of perceived superiority sheathed in unbridled power. If competition is rivalry, conquest is cruelty. Conquering cruelty has brought much devastation on Mother Earth and her human and her non-human inhabitants. Think about the medieval Crusades, the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, the China floods of 1931, the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, the deep water oil spill of 2010, all the results of human domination and consumption. Of course, there was the genocide against entire indigenous tribes across the U.S., including the indigenous peoples in California, perpetrated by both colonizers and California state militia. There was the destruction of the valley oak tree in the Central Valley, destroying the habitat for a variety of plant and animal species, altering soil conditions, and decreasing biodiversity and ecosystem resilience. The transatlantic slave trade, with the ensuing generations of enslaving humans on this continent, took place within the larger context of conquest, domination, and cruelty. What begins as exploration and innovation and expansion easily tips over into consumption, ownership, and the suffocation of all that ensures dignity and sustains another. This is conquering cruelty. If we're paying attention in our current environment, we see an unfiltered display of would-be conquerors in action. People who demand, demean, dehumanize, and destroy wherever they turn. Those with competitiveness and ambition have taken them over the line, out of the place of constructive development and into oppressive destruction. What are we to do in an environment that breathes and shouts and refuses anything short of conquering? Can we do something to resist being swept up in the same energy, an energy that demeans and demands and dehumanizes the other? We can all identify who the other looks like to us. In an invigorating conversation this past week, a good friend told me about the toxic environment in which she has to function on a daily basis. And she stated that she consciously will not match the energy around her. It is a conscious decision, one which itself demands enormous amounts of energy. But these are the kinds of conscious decisions resulting in great outlays of energy which are required to recognize our culture, assess its merit or lack thereof, and make choices that run entirely contrary to that which is consistently on display. After a competitive sporting event very recently, a young athlete was overheard questioning, "What is the sense of this?" And I have to say, she poses a valid question. Most of our culture runs on competition, winning or losing, rankings and levels rather than collaboration and cooperation that seeks the well-being of the community, the well-being of all. Rugged individualism runs through our veins. Each one makes it or doesn't make it by themselves. Sports are overwhelmingly competitive, and while team sports do have a very strong element of collaboration and cooperation, the goal is not primarily to have fun or to build community, but to win, right? Though we may have consciously resisted the philosophy of pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, this concept is woven into the fiber of late Western capitalism. We want to be on top. We want to win. And you may ask yourself at this point, what does this have to do with a person of faith? Or this scripture from Proverbs 11, for that matter? I believe there is a connection. Regardless of the topic, the current political or societal climate, or the scripture text in question, as followers of Jesus, it is our mission to shape our attitudes, our actions, our words in ways that align with the gospel of the Christ. This is the reason we look at scripture carefully, seeking to find places in ourselves and in our faith community in which incongruity hides and inconsistency flourishes. As we know, language defines and shapes who we are. So let's have a look at the key words that were read for us from Proverbs 11. Humility, integrity, virtue, righteousness, uprightness, honesty, discernment, guidance, grace, kindness, justice, generosity, goodwill. That's an impressive list. With many of these words, just as was the case with the competitive words, we identify them as describing virtue and value, character traits, which are then reflected in a particular way of living in this world, a way of relating to fellow humans, a way of walking gently on the earth. These are words of collaboration, cooperation, compassion, but not collaboration as describing treasonous partnerships. That's also collaboration, but collaboration as give and take, of mutual respect, of shared, forward-moving wisdom. I challenge you to think about when you have last observed these character traits, this way of showing up in the world in public figures, whether they're local, national, or state politicians, or on the international scene. Where have you seen them in family members, in fellow members of the faith community, or amongst your fellow students or colleagues? Do you expect to find these qualities on display? Or is that even desirable? What does it feel like to be a kind person in a cruel and aggressive environment? Is there virtue in that? Is it safe? Does it even matter? Or think about humility. What does humility look like in relationships, in a church meeting, or on the world stage? Does it show up with relevance? Kindness and humility, taking only those two examples, offer us a way of relating from a place of cooperation and collaboration. Consistency in exhibiting integrity, righteousness, honesty, and generosity will set us apart. It will be noticed. But I don't mean noticed for the sake of recognition or honor, but noticed in how people will respond to being around us. Do we come in with a different energy, or do we match what is projected onto us? If we approach others from a place of calm and confidence, we may notice in time that the energy in a relationship shifts, that the energy in meetings shift, that the energy in a community shifts. This is not the same as leading from a place of inferiority or subordination, self-doubt, or self-justification. No. Respect, humility, kindness are strong qualities, needed energies, reflections of Jesus the Christ. We have become so accustomed to idolizing strength, which has come to mean loud, aggressive talk and ruthless action, when it should be equated with respectful guidance forward. And speaking of guidance, take note of this verse. Without guidance, the people fail. But when there are many counselors, there is safety. I believe this is one of the strongest arguments in this text for collaborative, cooperative living, learning, and leading that we have. This is also a persuasive argument for collaborative leadership. We are stronger together. When there are many counselors, there is safety, there is guidance. This happens when people come together, pray together, listen to one another, show respect and kindness towards one another, and rally around a vision together, embrace a challenge together, stay connected so no one falls behind. This is our opportunity. In the coming months, CUCC will be called upon to collaborate and cooperate. We are not looking to conquer. We're not looking to dominate. We are looking to show up with compassion toward each other, toward the city in which we live. We are not on this faith journey for the purpose of providing superiority or to prove that we are the biggest or the loudest, nor that we wish to dominate a narrative. Our purpose is to build, to encourage, to share the love and welcome of Christ for everyone, all while holding tightly to these virtues of Proverbs 11. So on a concluding note, there are also wildly popular children's books that explore and underscore the value of collaboration. Who would have known? Well, here's a series. This one is about Sophia, who along with her abuelo helped those in her neighborhood who can't get out by running their errands for them. She ends up being a tiny organizer in her community. She talks to her neighbors, she talks to city council, and she garners enough support for a new neighborhood park. She couldn't have done that alone. Another one describes the frustration of parents with an incredibly brilliant child, Ada, who cannot stop thinking and wondering and trying to figure things out. This becomes a group project that ultimately produces a scientist. And yet another outlines the hurdles of poor Iggy when visions of architecture fill his curious brain. He faces strong opposition from a strict second grader until there is a crisis in which the teacher herself needs to be rescued. So Iggy enlists his entire class and they concoct a solution. Collaboration, even for the little people. There are ways to reinforce collaboration and compassion and cooperation, and there are many reasons for that. It begins with ourselves, with the children that we impact, the spheres of influence in which we move. At this point in our history as a nation and as a congregation, we will do well if we learn to be people who collaborate, not compete. People who listen before they speak. People who look at the resources that are available, uniting around one vision, one mission, one opportunity after another to further the collaborative, cooperative, compassionate kingdom of the Christ together. May God help us.